Top 100. Top 100. Top 100.
Project.
And action.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Top 100 Project, the podcast that chronologically reviews the American Film Institute's 1998 and 2007 lists of the 123 greatest American movies. Consider yourself warned that we're going to spoil this one. We'll hold nothing back, so you're best to see the film first. I'm Ryan Ellis with my wife, Bev. Hello, Bev.
Hello.
Okay, so the coming attractions trivia for The Third Man. Name at least 3 similarities between Joseph Cotton's character in Citizen Kane and The Third Man, and I think you might know these this time.
Yeah, I thought about it while we were watching the movie, and I can name 3. So, in both movies, he's playing a writer.
Correct.
In both movies, he's friends with Orson Welles' character, and they've been friends since school.
Yes, I would add a key point is they have a major falling out.
And they have a major falling out.
They were
and
friends.
In both movies, Welles offers him a job. In one, he takes and keeps that job for many years. In the other, he doesn't really get a chance to take him up on the offer, but both times he offers him a job.
I always try to leave this open for the possibility of something I hadn't thought of. There's 3. The third one I had thought of, actually, was he outlives Welles' character.
Oh,
in
yes.
both films. Both times
yes.
Welles' character is dead before the movie is over. Oh, there's a spoiler right off the bat.
Yeah, I know, no kidding.
Harry Lime, one of the more famous villains of all time, who's barely in the movie.
Yeah.
And he doesn't survive to the end of the film. So the Top 100 Project's 36th movie, The Third Man, was 57th on the 1998 Top 100 list between MASH and Fantasia, and then didn't make the 2007 cut at all. The Third Man opened in England on August 31st, 1949, then was released in the States on February 2nd, 1950. I think it was a 1949 film. The Third Man was beloved in Great Britain and was the highest grossing picture released there in 49. It drew a decent amount of crowds in the States, too. Bev will read you the skinny on the film.
American pulp novelist Holly Martins, played by Joseph Cotton, travels to post-war Vienna to see old friend Harry Lime, played by Orson Welles, and perhaps even work with him. When Holly arrives, Harry has just died. What follows is Holly's attempt to solve the mystery of who was the third man who supposedly carried Harry's body away from the car accident that took his life. Or did that accident even take Harry's life at all?
Or in a nutshell, writer attends drug salesman's funeral twice. What'd you think?
I really liked it. It's super fun. You know, the list has a lot of movies that are just kind of popcorn crowd pleasers and a lot of important kind of films with more depth that are more challenging. This is one of those great films that kind of straddles both of those worlds and does a pretty good job of it. It's super fun to watch. Really kinetic. It moves at a great breakneck speed, but you never lose the thread of the plot. It's really easy to follow. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. The performances were fantastic. Cotton, I think, was a great leading man.
But also, I think he might be one of the biggest losers we've had.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't really...
He's a drip. No one respects him.
Aside from, like, The Tramp, maybe. Is worse at life.
Well, I guess it's deliberate here, too, but they're playing that off for comedic effect. But in this movie, he's somebody who's succeeding as a pulp novelist writing corny westerns, but nobody respects him.
One person respects him. Sergeant Payne respects him.
Right.
He's, like, his biggest fan.
I'm going to start you off some trivia right away since you mentioned him. He's played by Bernard Lee. Mm-hmm. What famous film series did Bernard Lee play a major character in a recurring role?
I'm going to have to guess because I have no idea, so I'll say The Thin Man.
Nope, it was much later than that. He was M in the Bond movies many years. Yeah, Bernard Lee.
Well, what do you know?
Yeah. Alita Valley, who plays Anna, keeps calling Holly Harry.
Oh, yeah.
And Harry seems to have some kind of contempt for his friend. I mean, looks like he's maybe willing to kill him. We'll get to the Ferris wheel scene a little later on, the very famous Ferris wheel scene.
I know, we're jumping all over the place. It's hard not to. So many great little
One of the great reasons that we tell people we're going to spoil movies is so we can do it right away and not have to worry about, oh, wait, we should get to that at the end when No, we can do it right away. The other one who doesn't respect him is Trevor Howard, who plays Major Calloway. Although that's returned in kind because Holly calls him Major Callahan, and I'm not Irish.
Yeah, it's true. None of the Austrians seem to really pay him that much respect either. They're just kind of trying to get him, I guess, out of their hair. Or
I wonder if, as a novelist, if he's talented enough to write this story. He says at one point, I'm going to write a novel called The Third Man about what's happening to me here. Even though it's a real thing that he's been through and witnessed this and been part of this, is he good enough to really get it down on paper authentically?
He doesn't seem to think so. He doesn't have any respect for his own work. And he's broke. Like, how good of a writer could he possibly be? It's a little strange, actually, that somebody who has books that are successful enough that he has a fan isn't making a living as a writer.
He could be making just enough money to get by, but he's also an alcoholic. I think that's kind
of...
It's not blatantly in your face, but he's drinking too much.
He's a great leading man. He's a great, narrator, right? He's the Horatio of the story.
Well, there you go.
He's the one that's figuring it all out.
That's something that... Okay, David L. Selznick was one of the producers on this film. He and Alexander Korda, the two of them teamed up as mega producers to make this film. And it was Selznick who wanted Cotton to read the opening narration. The DVD that we own is Carol Reed's voice, and Reed is the one, Carol Reed's the director, and he's the one who wanted, of course, to do the narration and the opening and the kind of the tone that he had, this sort of... I never knew the old Vienna. And so it's almost like, who is this that's reading this? Because when it's Cotton, it would make more sense, but from what I've heard, I've never heard the Cotton version of the narration, but it's more whimsical, I believe. And
he's kind of like a voice of God, but like you say, he's not omnipotent. He doesn't know what Vienna was like before the war, and he's clearly shady. But they never really do reveal his character, who he's supposed to be, the narrator at the beginning.
And we never hear him again.
I love his narration, though. I love the opening. It feels very modern. Like, there was something that feels like you could pick that up and place it in any movie made today, and it wouldn't feel out of place at all. It wouldn't feel like an old film. It's so fast-paced and irreverent, like that VO juxtaposed with these imposing and rather depressing images of early Cold War Vienna. I just loved it. It was a great opening for the film. It really set the tone. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the first films we've seen that's had a kind of non-traditional, or at the time it would have been non-traditional, credit sequence.
Yeah,
we watched It's a Wonderful Life, and there's pages, and they have frames, and they list all the cast and crew. This is, you see the zither playing the theme song, the really, truly wonderful theme song. I love it. It's so perfect.
Apparently Orson Welles would go into restaurants and do other kinds of things with that as his theme music.
Oh, no kidding. It's good. It was not written by a traditional film composer. It was just like a street performer or a restaurant performer.
Anton Karas. Anton Karas is the name. Carol Reed saw him in a bar. And he said, I want that music. And Reed had to fight for many things in this production. Selznick was not an easy guy to work with, even though he was nearing the end of his run as a powerful producer. I don't know what Korda was like, but Reed had to fight for this music. It's almost like it's jaunty and fun music, but it isn't really at the same time. And I don't agree with Roger Ebert. We've mentioned him so many times, and he's a huge fan of this film. In his review, talks about how no music has ever fit better to a movie's action scenes, or maybe to scenes in general. I don't agree with that at all. I think that the music counterbalances it well. Maybe that's his point, but I don't think it's the best music I've ever heard that goes with a movie, by any means. But yeah, it's definitely an unusual way of doing music, too. If you'd gone with a traditional score, the movie might have been forgettable. Mm-hmm. Music is something that's overrated in movies. We've talked about that before on podcasts, too, but this is definitely a damn good one. Not nominated for any awards. That's one thing I want to get into in the podcast pretty early, too. Awards, because this movie is not really an American film. The only American connections it has are Cotton, Welles, who's not in the movie very much anyway, and then Selznick as a producer. Yeah. And yet it's on the AFI list. It's on many AFI lists.
The British also claim it as their own. They call it one of the greatest British films ever made.
Right.
I saw that it was on that list, and it's like, it's kind of disputed. And maybe that's why it got bumped off the 2007 list, because I was a little surprised to learn that it didn't make both lists.
Especially when it was 57. That's a long way to drop off. 43 or more spots. Third Man won the British Film Institute, so it's obviously the counterbalance of the AFI is the BFI, and it's their best British film of the 20th century. The best. So that's just kind of curious, isn't it? We talked about how Tom Jones and Hamlet, maybe others, but those two at least, Best Picture winners, Oscar winners, were not nominated for this list because they couldn't be. They're not American films. I don't know how Third Man really is either.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's
definitely a stretch.
Yeah, London Film Productions was the opening credit, a Carol Reed production. You pointed out how unusual that is. The director takes production credit at the beginning. We've not seen that, if at all. We've not seen it often, even though there have been directors who've been their own producer. Welles on Citizen Kane. That's a dispute about this film. You probably read about this in your research. It's a pretty famous backstory element is that, Orson Welles really directed that movie. And there have been times he stoked that fire a little bit. He also has recanted and said, no, it's Carol Reed's movie. He directed it. Yeah. Welles apparently wrote the Cuckoo Clock speech. He had some say in some other things, I suppose, too.
But that's not an unusual contribution for an actor to make. You frequently hear about actors making contributions to the script, but nobody's going to say that same actor also deserves directing credit.
Or writing credit, even.
It's just that it was a good film that happened to star a very good director. Yeah. And it was a very modern-feeling film that takes kind of risks that would have probably seemed pretty out there and daring at the time.
So Wells has this very famous character of Harry Lime. Doesn't appear for over an hour. Doesn't have any dialogue for about 75 minutes of an hour and 45-minute movie. Yet they talk about him all the time. He's talked about that with other people in other films he did, and other films that other people have done too, I suppose, where the character's talked about constantly, but maybe they're not in the movie all that much. And that's a great build-up for you. You're being talked about all the time, and you're built up as either a great villain or a great hero. But anyway, there's conflicting reports on whether or not he was good to work with, that he was a real jerk and prima donna, and there are other reports that once he really got into the thing, he was great to work with. In that scene where we first see his face, the cat only likes Harry, and then the cat is by some dude's feet, his face is lit by somebody else's apartment window, and then Holly, who is, that's Harry. But as you notice, Harry doesn't even speak in that scene, he just takes off.
Yeah, he just smiles.
And then as we later learn, he takes off into the sewers. I mean, this guy's not much of a metaphor there. He's a rat.
He's a rat, yeah.
So yeah, Wells is only in 2 A5 films. We've covered him both now. What did you think of his very small performance?
He's really good. Although one of my main complaints for the film is that he's a truly bad guy. Harry Lime he commits crimes that are horrible. In the pursuit of money, he lets children die by the dozens or hundreds. If we're to believe what the police say, which I think we are. And actually, he just goes as far as to admit that that's what he did. And he even admits that, you know what, you give me $20,000, I'll let a stranger die, even whether it's a child or not.
He's a sociopath.
He's a sociopath. And that's fine, and I'm actually glad that they didn't make it that ambiguous that he was a sociopath. But if you're going to write him like that, then you still have to explain why Holly, who doesn't seem like a sucker. In fact, he's so bright and so astute at picking up on things that he's the one that figures out there's something amiss with the story of how Harry died. Yet, we're supposed to believe that he's been fooled by this obvious sociopath for 20 years of his life.
I wondered about that when we were watching the film. Did Harry change during the war? Did he do something, see something, be a part of something that made him say, I'm checking out?
But if that was the case, and I totally see your point, I wish that they would have illustrated that through the script, through his performance, through anything. We just see this extremely bad dude. You see that he has the charisma, like a sociopath would, and that he has that smile, he has that charm, he can turn it on, but he's so thoroughly bad, and he doesn't even seem to try to hide that part of himself all that much. Why is Holly friends with him? Why is Anna in love with him?
Well, this is one of those films that has the main character on screen, main character being Holly, not being Harry, constantly. I don't know if he's on screen in every single scene, but it's awfully close. So if it's from his point of view, he can't see what happened with Harry unless somebody tells him. He can't know what happened with Harry to have made him change, or we can't know what it was that he was wrong about in the first place. Did Holly and Harry misjudge each other? He's offering him this job of helping him to sell diluted penicillin that's hurting and killing people, and kids at that. So did he misjudge Holly that he would want to be part of that? And did Holly misjudge Harry that he would be part of that? Because would Holly have ever gone over there if that's what he knew was supposed to be the point?
Maybe how the war changed him is that he now lives in a world where he doesn't have to hide that he's a sociopath anymore because he's surrounded by corruption.
Except faking his death is all about hiding.
Yeah, and why does he fake his death if he's going to stay in Vienna?
I think it's just he's going to work that much in the underground now. Then again, why reveal himself to Holly? But unless he thinks I'm going to pull this guy in as a sucker or even as an accomplice. Maybe this is the thing, we don't learn enough about Harry from any kind of firsthand. It's all through Holly, as we said. Maybe Harry just misses it, wants to have a friend around him.
That's one of my main complaints about the movie, is that we just don't seem to get to know Harry well enough to really explain how this whole situation could have possibly taken place. I kind of buy that Anna could have been in love with him because there's so much great depth to her character, and you just know that she's been through more than any of these people have seen, like even the criminals.
And she's not talking about it either.
She's not talking about it, and she has this darkness, and she has this sadness, and she actually plays it so beautifully. I really loved her character. One of my favorite things about the film, especially watching these old movies, is just, so refreshing to see a female character that has real depth and a past, and a backstory, and something that's believable and something that's complex, as opposed to, the Donna Reeds of all these movies, the wives and girlfriends, and the, really not very well fleshed out characters.
Or in the case of Sierra Madre last week, the only female is the mountain.
None. Yeah, there's barely any women in that movie at all. That's not the last time we'll see that.
The next little while of our podcast, we're going to have some very strong female characters, Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve in particular, right in a row. But yeah, she's got a strong role.
And Anna's no exception. She really stands out, and her performance was great, and I love the romance, not romance, with her and Holly, that he's just in love with her, and of course he is. She's just so enigmatic and mysterious, and she's this kind of damsel in distress, but she doesn't want your help, and she doesn't need your help, although she does need help, but she won't take it because she's too strong. She won't lean on a man like that. Like, she plays both those sides, and she's also, you know, striking and lovely, and that whole unrequited romance between the two of them, capped off by the final shot of the film, the beautiful, picturesque, that long shot of her walking slowly towards the camera, and he's waiting for her, and he's gonna miss his plane waiting for her, but she doesn't even look at him. She just keeps going, and he lets her too. It's
a nice touch that she doesn't even glance at him.
No,
she doesn't even, like, not only does she not stop to talk to him, not only does she not stop and kiss him or hug him or go off with him, any of those things, she doesn't even, her eyes don't even go sidelong at him. He literally is not there for her.
How tempting it must have been for everybody working on that film to just, like, create some moment between the two of them. And apparently Graham Greene, who wrote the screenplay and a novelization of the screenplay, he wanted and fought for a happy romantic ending, but later admitted that he was wrong, and he was glad that Reed stuck up for the... And it's not that it's an unhappy ending, it's just not a romantically fulfilling ending. But it's it's the right ending.
Right, and we've talked about Chinatown quite a lot on these podcasts. I guess when we get to it, we're going to be able to talk about it a little more directly. Not to spoil the ending, but I'll say this. The writer of that film, Robert Towne, same thing. Wanted a happy ending. The director, Roman Polanski, overruled him. And I believe Towne has also recanted in the years that followed and said,
that was the right ending.
Roman's ending was the right one for his
movie. That's a way
least.
bleaker, sadder ending than this movie. This movie, at least the bad guy didn't get away. You know, at least...
And one more connection. This is not an AFI movie, but Quentin Tarantino wrote True Romance, and Tony Scott, the late, great Tony Scott, directed it. Tarantino wanted it to be an unhappy ending. Scott wanted a happy ending. But that ending is the right ending, I think. And having them all be separate, the three main characters. One of them is dead. One of them's going off on her own to be in the Soviet sector, and God knows what's going to happen to her.
Yeah.
And Holly will probably go back with a story and maybe even be a successful novelist if he can possibly capture this with his relative talents. Now, that's the actual ending, but the climactic ending would be the chase through the sewers.
Oh, is there anything not to love about that scene?
And it's funny, it's a chase scene, which we've seen done in mediocre movies hundreds of, maybe thousands of times now. But this is a great one, and I think it might be the first chase scene we've had, certainly a climax of any movie. If it's not the only one, it's one of the rare ones.
There's just everything about it. People probably talk about the cinematography in that scene all the time, with the great harsh lighting and the wet sewers.
And what's lighting doing down there on those kinds of levels, but it's a movie.
That's neither here nor there. I'm sure lots of people pay compliments to that all the time, but
I have a wisecrack line for that, by the way, that I remember from the commentary on Lord of the Rings. I think it was the third Lord of the Rings movie, when Sean Astin, who plays Sam, asked the cinematographer about where's the light coming from in some tower when Frodo's caught by the orcs. The answer was the same place the music is coming from. I thought that was a good answer, because it's
a great answer.
Because it is a movie. I mean, not everything's going to be exactly true.
Nobody's going to nitpick that. They're just going to be caught up in the story.
Especially at the end of a great movie.
I wasn't thinking about that when we were watching Third Man. That wasn't on my mind at all. It's just beautiful to look at, and those silhouettes, and there's so much ambiguity in those scenes. You can't tell who's who sometimes, and there's so much confusion. It's so well shot and edited, and it must have been meticulously planned, or maybe not, I don't know, but it manages to be both disorienting and visually comprehensive. Like, something that so many action scenes fail at is to help you understand what's happening visually in each scene, and it winds up being really fast paced without being confusing. It's just so adeptly performed. I just loved it. What really stood out to me, and maybe it's because I'm an editor, but I think that the real star of that scene is the sound design.
Yeah.
You know, all those footsteps and the echoing, and there's the muffling audio coming from other parts of the sewer, but you don't know where, because you wouldn't be able to tell in the sewer. It places you there so realistically and so effectively, and I just loved that. And
some of the scenes were shot in actual Viennese sewers. They, in fact, had such a problem with people doing exactly what Harry's doing in reality that they had actual cops down there. So a lot of the people that were working as cops, as characters, were off-duty police.
No
who were
kidding.
helping them out, do what they do anyway. But here's 2 movies in a row we have that are set mostly on location. There's an awful lot of studio stuff in this film, and Church of Sierra Madre had some as well, obviously. But the key scenes are set in Mexico and Treasure, and in Vienna here.
Yeah.
Interesting that the films will go out of studios, but also go out of the country in both cases, to Mexico and to Austria. And now we're going into Hollywood itself with Sunset Boulevard.
Ah, that's true.
We're going to visit backlots, in fact, in Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into the heart of Broadway with All About Eve. So we're going to go right back to Americana, but we're as far away from it as you can get almost with the last couple of weeks of films.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so very vivid and realistic and certainly technically done extremely well by Reed and his production team.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it wasn't actually Wells, because this is where I read he was a bit of a prima donna and he didn't really want to go in those sewers, I guess.
Yeah, with his body double.
But the scenes where they do have him, and maybe it was on sets, but the scenes where he's trying to get away, and get another spoiler, Holly's the one who finishes him off, but off camera we don't see him actually shoot him.
But you see that great moment that they have where Wells has already been shot and he's trying to climb up the sewer grate, but he can't lift it.
Mm-hmm.
Holly has him dead to rights, and he just gives him the thumbs up, like, go ahead and do it.
I'm not going to jail, so you might as well kill me.
The most amazing thing about Wells' performance is he's such, even though he's just shot and killed the most lovable character in the film, Sergeant Payne, you see in his performance that look on his face when he's cornered like a rat in the sewer and he wants to get away so bad, and there's still this big part of you that just wants him to win and you don't know why. It's like
that's the thing we've talked about with other films though, because it's the big star and it's a really talented actor.
It's the charisma and the charisma of a sociopath.
You've never seen Touch of Evil. We're not going to cover Touch of Evil, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I'll say this about the end of that movie. He plays a pretty rotten cop. I think the line is he's a great detective but a lousy cop. But towards the end of it, you're supposed to root for Heston 100%. You're supposed to root against Wells 100%. But because it's Orson Welles, it's hard to root fully against him.
He just has that charisma. It's hard to really explain or put your finger on it. But even at that moment when he gives Holly the thumbs up, like, go ahead and do me in, and Holly does it, and you're happy that at least his friend got to do it. At least he got to die on his own terms. It just really plays that dichotomy of his character, and it gives the film so much more complexity, and it makes it so much more fun to watch and think about after you've watched it too. And
the relationship that they have essentially 2 scenes together. Well, I suppose you could argue 3, but the very brief one when you first see Harry after the movie's been on for an hour. But certainly the media scene they have together is the Ferris wheel scene, which ends with the cuckoo clock speech. But in that scene, there's not very subtle subtext when they're up there and Harry just whips open the door when they're at the top of the Ferris wheel, and he doesn't make a move on Holly, but it's almost like, I could just push you out and kill you right now. And he says that line about how these dots down there don't mean anything, which just, there you go, shows you right there he's a sociopath. He doesn't care about any of these people. And his point is that you don't know these people, why do you care about them? Well, you and I would agree with that if we were in that Ferris wheel too. I don't know that person. Do I directly care if that person dies of a heart attack right now? I suppose not, but I don't want that to happen to them.
If somebody said, I'll give you $20,000 if you...
But what a rationalization is what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, influence, we'll talk about that right now. That is kind of the concept of Richard Kelly's movie, The Box.
Yeah.
In that movie, if you directly kill somebody, you don't know who they are, but you profit from it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if the third man literally influenced the Box, but there's that connection there. The scene ends with the cuckoo clock speech. Now, I don't know if you'd ever heard of it or if you knew anything about that
You
before.
had told it to me before. You had quoted it several times to me, I think.
Here's a trivia question for you, because I've read, and maybe you did too, that the cuckoo clock was not invented in Switzerland.
Oh, no,
Where was it invented?
Oh, gosh. The cuckoo clock?
Yeah.
Specifically.
Very nearby.
Germany?
Germany it is.
Yeah.
It's a German invention. But obviously the point of that scene is him saying bloodshed and terrible things, war, brought about great art. And then peace and brotherhood in Switzerland brings about some useless invention. Well, maybe not useless, but not nearly as important as the Renaissance, Michelangelo. But again, what a crap rationalization that is. Like, this guy's not an artist. He's not going to create great art. He's simply out for his own...
Yeah, he's not being responsible. So he's like, I'm creating chaos so that I can create part of the world where art can flourish because of conflict. And, and they wouldn't have even known this at the time, but his speech kind of did, in a way, come true. This is a movie about post-war Europe, which was very quickly becoming Cold War Europe. And the movie's taking place in a disputed part of Europe, like the heart of the Cold War. And the Cold War was responsible for space travel. Like, because of the Cold War, it kind of directly led to men walking on the moon, that competition between Russia and the United States. Like, that's the truth of the cuckoo clock speech. Of course, that same competitive drive between those countries also spawned the arms race, which has produced enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet and everything living on it many, many times over. But, we can save that point for when we get to Dr. Strangelove.
So speaking of post-war, Cold War part of Vienna and what they were doing with that great city that was bombed out, what are the 4 countries that have quartered it off?
Oh, no. Okay, the Allies. France
is one of them.
Definitely Russia and England. Spain? Is that the fourth one?
You're missing the easy one, I think.
Oh, England, America?
There you go.
Oh, God, how did I miss that?
The States, Russia, UK, and France. So the stars of the film, we've talked about them a little bit, but Joseph Cotten, this is his second of 2 AFIs. He was in Kane, as we know. And he liked to say how proud he was that he was in Citizen Kane, Shadow of a Doubt, and The Third Man, directed by Wells, Alfred Hitchcock, Carol Reed. 3 very renowned directors, especially the first 2. And according to what he believes, and I've heard this too, that those are the favorite movies of each of those people. Hitchcock's been quoted as saying Shadow of a Doubt was his favorite of his films.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was the star of all 3 of them, or at least one of the stars of all 3 of them. And he gets top billing. There's a title card that goes Cotten, then Alida Valli, who plays Anna, then Wells is third, and Trevor Howard. And Trevor Howard had been in Brief Encounter. He plays the lead in that David Lean film. Then he was in Mutiny on the Bounty with Brando, the 1962 version. We talked about that on the 1935 Mutiny on the Bounty podcast. And he had small roles in Superman and Gandhi, so he was around a long time. Obviously, we just talked about Orson Welles, his second of 2 AFIs, also was in Kane, as we very well know. I think Touch of Evil certainly could have made this list, and it's kind of a shame it didn't. I don't think he had made any other movies that would realistically have had a chance to make it, but at least he's in this one in a small role. Selznick didn't like the idea of casting Wells because he was, we've used this phrase before, box office poison. I don't think it really made a dent in the movie in the end anyway. In fact, people probably would have been thinking, oh, where's Orson Welles after a while? Then you forget he's been in the movie and suddenly, oh, wait, there he is. We forgot. He's actually in this movie.
Because I didn't see the twist coming, I kept wondering when they were going to introduce this new character that Orson Welles played. I'm like, so strange. When are we going to meet him, his character? And I was thrilled to discover that he was Harry and that Harry was alive.
Alida Valli, who just goes by Valli in the opening credits. She was Italian, and she left Hollywood a few years after to make films in Europe, so we didn't really get much from her after that in this part of the world. And Bernard Lee, we talked about already. He went on to play M in the Bond movies from Dr. No all the way to Moonraker. And Wilfred Hyde White has a role in this movie. He's going to be Pickering in My Fair Lady, which we'll get to sometime in the middle of next year. Which leads us to the director, Carol Reed, we talked about a little bit already. He had directed Odd Man Out and The Fallen Idol, some English films I've seen within recent years, very solidly made, and he eventually would go on to direct Oliver, which won the Best Picture, Best Director, and several other awards. Not a very good movie. It won out over 2001, which wasn't even nominated for Best Picture that year, interestingly. We mentioned Graham Greene, who wrote the screenplay. He also wrote Fallen Idol. And then his novels, The End of the Affair and The Quiet American, were each adapted twice. Yeah. So there's 4 versions of those 2 books out there to be watched. I think in both cases it was an English movie and an American movie. We mentioned Korda and Selznick were producers. They were uncredited, though. What they got at the beginning was presented by credits. And behind the camera, we had some incredibly talented people. We mentioned Anton Karas with the zither music. Robert Krasker was a cinematographer. He had some fascinating angles and things. Reed, of course, is the director who chose those angles.
Yeah.
And he took a lot of heat from his contemporaries
about
that.
What do you think? What do you think about the canted angle?
He was going for a very deliberate style. Like the whole thing we mentioned about having light in the sewers. Well, there's a lot of arguments for why you would do that. You want to see these people. If you want to make it authentic, we probably wouldn't see anything. But it's a style thing. And the movie goes for all kinds of weird styles. That's the whole point. And it's set in a place that was actually bombed out during the war. So there's an incredible reality, but here's the surreality playing against that.
I liked it, but I thought it was a little overkill. By the end, it felt gimmicky. Initially, it's just fun and it's modern and it's something that's different and it's creative. It adds this great kind of energy to the film, but it just seemed to always be there, whether the scene called for it or not.
But he had to be consistent, though.
Sure. There's a funny story. After the film came out, Carol Reed was close friends with William Wyler. And Wyler sent him a level in the mail. Yeah. And it's like, put this on your camera next time you go out to make a movie.
We've covered Wyler a few times already in the project. And he's a very classical filmmaker. Best Years of Our Lives is very straightforward. Wuthering Heights is as impressionistic as it is at times. It's pretty straightforward, too. Yeah, he didn't play that kind of way at all.
Yeah, and I'm not
Willie, don't play that.
Yeah, and I'm not complaining about the canted angles. I always support innovation, but yeah, it felt like a little much by the end.
The assistant director who would have learned some things from Carol Reed was Guy Hamilton, who wanted to do Goldfinger and other Bond movies. Oh, neat. Interesting behind the scenes. I don't usually talk about assistant directors, but here's a guy who actually became a director of note. The last technical note I want to make about this movie is that it was filmed in part, obviously not very much of it, but some of it was filmed in Shepperton, which later became known as Pinewood, home to future AFIers, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Strangelove, 2001, Star Wars, and Blade Runner, and also just many other big productions.
Pretty good company.
Pinewood, a.k.a. Shepperton, is a very famous place. They made movies.
Not famous enough that I had heard of it before today, but that's me. Before we get away from talking about the technicals, I do want to address one thing that they didn't do at all in this film, was that they didn't have subtitles. I love this detail of this film, even though it's like really quite frustrating when you're watching it, but it's something that they did in Treasure of the Sierra Madre as well, right. And I couldn't help reflecting on that, about how it's such an unusual thing to do, and these two very different films did this exact same technique where they have long, extended scenes of people speaking in a foreign language and none of it being subtitled for the sake of the audience. I know in the case of John Huston, he went overseas and actually worked with the war effort. He made propaganda films. So did Carol Reed. I don't know how much traveling he did, but presumably both of these men would have spent a significant amount of time in foreign countries overhearing conversations that they couldn't understand, trying to communicate with people that they can't communicate with, that they just have this barrier that just cannot be overcome sometimes. And I wonder if they did this on purpose to mimic that feeling of otherness, that confusion, that disorientation that soldiers would have felt in Europe. Graham Greene also, he lived in Sierra Leone during the war, and he was a great traveler and a member of MI6, I learned. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I think it also plays into what I said earlier about Holly being the main character. Everything's through his eyes in one way or another, and he wouldn't know these other languages.
Yeah. These scenes go on for like a laboriously long time sometimes, and you feel his frustration that he would feel, even though they do a pretty good job of visually telling a story so that you have some idea what's going on, whether you can understand the actors or not.
Yeah.
It's a great technique.
Pretty gutsy, though, because you definitely risk alienating an audience. Yeah. But we said in the last podcast that there's an awful lot of films in the 40s, most of them, that are not easy. They're tough. They're not asking... Well, I guess some of them get sentimental. I shouldn't say they don't. Sierra Madre really doesn't. This one definitely doesn't. Wonderful Life does. Other films maybe in some ways do. But they're not the goofy comedies of the 30s for the most part. And there's nothing wrong with those comedies. There's some great ones in there. But it's a movie that in a different kind of way is...
Yeah. The 40s definitely has a zeitgeist. There's definitely a different feeling from the films that we saw before.
And this is the last one from the 40s we're doing. Now, I mentioned the influence earlier about how Ebert's a huge fan of the film and just talked it up in everything I've ever read that he's ever mentioned this movie. He loved it more than probably anyone else ever did, including the filmmakers, I'm guessing. And I mentioned about it, Richard Kelly's movie, The Box, could definitely be based on this. The other thing I think you could make a point about is that the dubious morality of everyone in the film. I mean, almost everybody has got something about them you could really call into question. Calloway's not exactly innocent either. The Trevor Howard character is not exactly Mr. Nice Guy all the time. Although I love the scene when he takes Joseph Cotten to see what the penicillin's done to young kids, done to babies. Kind of a Rosemary's Baby quality where you don't see what's really happening. It's like we never see, spoiler alert for Rosemary's Baby, we're not going to cover that movie, never mind. You never see the baby that supposedly looks like a devil child. You have to imagine it. Well, we don't see what happened to these kids, but it's Holly's reaction. Like, oh God, what are these?
They spare us the gruesomeness of seeing, what Holly sees.
But everyone in this movie's got a dubious morality, and it echoes Double Indemnity. We're going to get a lot of it in the movies yet to come, mostly in the crime genre with Pulp Fiction, the Godfather films, and even Vertigo. All right, the awards and other AFI lists, and as I said, for a British film, this was quite well respected by the various AFI lists. So we mentioned Robert Krasker, the cinematographer. He won an Oscar for this film for black and white cinematography, and he got nominated for Best Director and Best Editing, which you liked so much. The movie was 75th on the Top 100 Throws list. Harry Lime was the 37th evilest dude on the Heroes and Villains list, and it was 5th in the mystery category on the Top 100 Genres. And that was The Third Man. So parting thoughts on The Third Man.
Oh, I can't recommend it enough. Whether you think it's one of the greatest films ever made, you cannot fail to be entertained by it. And I'm surprised and a little disappointed that it didn't make the 2007 list. There's definitely films that are on the 2007 list that do not deserve to be there as much as Third Man does.
We've covered some. We're going to cover a lot more that you could definitely make arguments don't belong. Okay, that's it for this one. So next week, we change gears as we bring you our third installment of the Not 100 Project. Heading into New Year's week, we tackle the well-loved rom-com When Harry Met Sally. And we will have our first ever guest podcaster. And you'll find out who that is next week when we cover the film. So coming attractions trivia for When Harry Met Sally. Name at least 3 of the 5 things Harry says he loves about Sally at the end of the movie.
Well, that won't be hard for me.
She already knows all of them.
In the meantime, for more trivia from other movies that Ryan and I have talked about, and lots more other fun stuff, please visit our website, top100project.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Top 100 Project on iTunes. You can also find us on Podomatic, top100project.podomatic.com. What did you think of The Third Man? Please let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you guys. Our email is top100projectpodcast@gmail.com. And cut.